Hi guys, it's Rocio, and I have Henish here, who is owner and CEO of Cow Home Co. He's an investor and a serial homeowner seller. So I have a question that buyers are asking us 24/7, and who else to ask this question to than to Henish, and he could give us an insight on what we could do and pick his brain a little bit. So the question is, the $1 million question is, how does somebody get their offer accepted in this market? So, okay, Henish, let's ask this question. In your eyes, how can a buyer better themselves to get an offer accepted in this market?
Yeah, absolutely. So a great question. The key is to start early, right? The last thing you want is a buyer that says, "Oh, I'm not ready," until they find the perfect house and say, "Okay, now I'm ready to buy a house. Let's put in an offer." Because you got to start at least a few months in advance, if not longer, to make sure your pre-approval for your mortgage is ready to go. Unless you're an all-cash offer, you're going to need a mortgage. And so the sooner that you can get to a mortgage lender, talk to them about your situation, and get approved, the better you'll have a chance to buy a house, whether it's 6 months or a year down the road, because then you know all the criteria that you need to buy a house, right? In terms of your down payment, if you need to improve your credit, if you need to improve your reserves, and all these things. So having that done and ready to go so that when we find your right property, you're ready to execute, that has to be done first, because we don't have time to wait for you to try to figure out to get a pre-approval. Because as you know, sometimes it could take more than a day to get pre-approval. It could take 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And all of a sudden you find out you have an old cell phone collection you didn't realize about. And now your score is a 600 and you really need a 720, but you could fix that in 2 months, but we don't have 2 months because you found your right house. So prepare, get it done now if you're thinking about buying a house anytime in the future, right? So that's step one.
Okay. Does the type of financing a buyer obtains weigh in your decision?
It does. We really want people that have heavy down payments, just because if it's a competitive market, the last thing a seller wants to do is waste time with the buyer that can't perform. And by can't perform, that means that they can't get financing for some reason. So if it doesn't appraise, or their credit changes, or they lost their job, or more importantly, they don't have enough down payment to cover the difference of their purchase price and their mortgage, then that's going to be a problem. So conventional buyers that have 20% or more are more favored, because also the underwriting guidelines for those people that can get the 20% down are more liberal than it is for higher LTV financing. So unfortunately, if you've got cash, you're just in a better position to buy a house, and sellers are more likely to pick your offer versus a low or no down payment buyer. So depending on the price point, you kind of see that. So around the $500,000-$600,000 price point, you see lower no down payments, but anything over $700,000-$800,000 is flying off the shelf. And those are typically conventional buyers, because the ones with low down payments just can't compete as well.
Okay. During this market, we see a lot of buyers submitting offers outrageously above the asking price. So is it a good idea to waive appraisal in your eyes?
Is it a good idea? It's kind of subjective, right? With the market the way it is today, January 2021, your house is probably going to be worth more next month than it is this month. Is how fast things are going, right? We see that with one of our current listings in Sabre Springs. House sold 2 months ago, 3 months ago for $950. We're probably going to sell our house for maybe 40 to 50,000 more than that, and it's the same type of house. So the appraisals might not catch up, right? And so in this scenario, in a lot of scenarios, we're having people offer more than what an objective appraiser would say the house is worth. But if you want the house, then you got to pay the difference, or make it not contingent on your appraisal, because if that comes in low, you don't want that to kill the deal, because the seller's just going to go to the next buyer. And that's why if you get 10 offers, buyer number 2 is in the backup position, ready to go, if you can't execute.
So when somebody submits an offer to you and that it's not going to appraise, what else do you look for to make sure that this person could execute the offer?
Well, we often write that into our counter offers or into the contract themselves, is that buyer to pay X thousands dollars more than the appraisal, right? So if I know a house is going to appraise at $950 and we've got offers at $980, I'm gonna say, hey, you got to be willing to pay at least $30,000 more than the appraised value, because from our experience, we're fairly confident of what that property will appraise at. And so that's an important consideration to have in, because you don't want to find out 2 or 3 weeks down the road while you're in escrow that the appraisal came in low, and now the buyer wants to renegotiate with you, right? And because now it's a burn on the seller, because they're like, hey, I thought I was going to get a higher price, and now I don't want to just lose $30,000 because someone thinks my house is worth less when there's 9 other people that are willing to pay the same price, right? So objectively, it is worth that same price, even if the appraiser thinks it's worth less, because there's comps that sold a month, 2 months, 3 months ago that don't support that price because the market's red hot.
And this
So
is
I
where the
didn't
proof
answer that
of
question
funds.
necessarily. So is it a smart idea to waive your appraisal? If you want the house, probably.
And you have to have the money to pay out of pocket when it doesn't appraise, if it doesn't appraise.
Or you change the terms of your LTV, right? So maybe if you're getting an 80% LTV purchase, if the property isn't appraised, maybe you go up to 82 or 83 or 85%. So you put in, you're getting a slightly higher LTV mortgage, but then you don't have to put down more down payment. The other spread is that you could put that extra down payment to cover the difference to keep your mortgage the same amount that you initially intended.
Okay, some good tips there. We see a lot of buyers also asking for closing costs. So when you have 10 to 20 offers, and then you have some buyers that are asking for closing costs, is this usually weigh down your decision? Like, do you usually like not go with them because they're asking you for closing costs?
I mean, if I have my choice, I'm going to choose the offers that don't have closing costs because of what we just discussed, is that appraised value, right? Closing costs that the seller is giving to the buyer comes out of the purchase price, which has to be appraised by the bank. So if they're asking for $10,000 in closing costs and the property appraises at that same price, you've got that delta, and it just affects the net proceeds the seller gets. And so if you're comparing apples to apples, a $500,000 offer that's straight up versus a $500,000 offer with a $5,000 closing cost credit is a different of $5,000 for the buyer or for the seller. So so it's not an apples to apples. So the top number might be the same, but the bottom number is what people are looking at.
Okay. And then we talk about contingencies. You have some buyers that are shortening contingencies and some that, need a longer contingency period. Does that affect on your decision?
It does. That's the sooner that you can be confirmed and positive that you've got a buyer that's going to execute. So if a buyer's got a 7 or 10 day contingency, great. I only have to take this thing off the market for a week before I know for sure that this buyer is going to perform. If someone's putting in 21 day contingencies, that's 3 weeks. It's almost a month that I have to sit and hope and cross my fingers that the buyer is going to be able to perform. And that's just a lot of time to pay when, if a seller is ready to move, if it's already vacant, if you're an investor seller, you're paying interest on the property, and you want to know sooner than later. So shorter contingencies are helpful, and good lenders are able to get you quick approvals and move fast. And that's why if you have your file together with your mortgage people ready to go, then you are in a better position to buy that house.
Okay. And our last question is, because the market is so saturated with buyers, there's 10 plus offers in each property for the most part. We've heard that you come across a lot of off-market properties. So if a buyer is interested in an off-market property, what do they need to do in order to execute on these properties? Like, what tip do you give them in order for them to purchase an off-market property, and how can they get on your list?
Yeah, I mean, obviously contacting either of us, you can get on our list. I just did this just moments ago. A client of mine said, hey, we're scrambling. Our realtor's not getting us any properties. We're losing properties. We want something in Linda Vista. Sure enough, I got an off-market Linda Vista property. It came through my email. I shot it to them and said, let me know. We got to move fast. I can go check it out tonight, tomorrow morning, because we need to execute on this quickly. So buying off-market properties isn't for people that are indecisive. Right? And like, oh, maybe I think about it. You don't have time for that. You don't have time for that because they go quickly. So if you're an investor buyer like myself, I make decisions in minutes, right? If I see a house, let me make sure that the foundation's good and it's not falling off a hill. I'm going to execute right away, close in 7 days. If you're an end user, you don't have that luxury. It's hard because I get that you're not experienced at buying houses and it's not your business. And this could be your forever family house or one of your family houses that you could live in for the next 5 to 10 years. but you have to be prepared with your mortgage, with your expectations of what you're getting, which is usually a dated home, what's going to have some issues, but ideally it's under market value, right? So the property I pitched to my buyers is selling for 650, and we sold the property around the corner, very similar, for 815. So there's some room there, right? So they've got some room to fix it up and make it nice, but they got to be able to execute right away. They can't be like, oh, I didn't like the color of the paint, or, you know, the plants aren't nice enough. You can't have those kind of qualms, because that's something that can be solved with a couple $1,000, right?
Okay. So if somebody wants to connect with you, we will, link the description below. But overall, what you summarized is be prepared when you're about to purchase a home well in advance before you want to start shopping for homes. Try to get the best financing available. If you're going to waive appraisal, be ready to come up with the difference of the appraisal. Closing costs are not your preferred offers. So the less you ask the seller, the better off you are. Contingencies, the sooner you get close, the better. And if you are in the market for off-market properties, come and touch base with either one of us, and we'll get you a home that you want.
Oh, let's give you one more tip, which is make sure you've got a good agent, because if they're not reading the MLS showing information or how to submit an offer information, well, I already know you're off on a bad foot, right? So if I give you specific instructions on how to submit an offer and how to do showings and how to do this and that, and you're not reading it, well, you've already been put on my bad list of buyers that I don't want to work with, because you've got an agent that doesn't know how to read, right? And so we've had that so often, and I'm always like, well, cool, let me make sure I write down your information, because you don't know how to read and you didn't follow our instructions on how to submit this offer. I already know I'm going to have a problematic escrow with you, because you must not read the entire information. And so that's really key, to be diligent and respectful of the selling agent's requests, because if they give you specific instructions, they're not giving them for you to ignore them. They're giving them for you to follow them, so that they know that, okay, this person knows how to read and they followed my X hoops that they want me to jump through. I know that they'll be a good buyer, and they have good buyer control, and they know how to read my MLS instructions and follow protocols, because they've done this before. So super key point. A lot of agents miss that. And so if you've picked an agent that isn't doing that and you're not getting offers, that might be one of the reasons.
Got it. Read the MLS.
Read the MLS instructions, and it's tough because a buyer doesn't have access to all the data and information and notes that realtors do. So if your realtor is not reading it for you and telling you, hey, this is how we need to submit this offer, you're already just kicked down a rung in terms of the likelihood of you getting your offer accepted.
Good tip. Okay, that's all that I have for now. If you want to add something else, just feel free to chime in.
I'm good. No, that was good. That was good and thorough. And it does give a lot of information, because honestly, it's the better realtors call me and ask me the same questions. Hey, how do I get my offer accepted? What do we need to do? What's the top points for the seller? Do they need a lease back? Do they need any other considerations? So finding out if you can get that information ahead of time, it can be useful.
Okay. One more thing that just came up into my head. I know you do this all the time whenever you're representing a seller or a buyer, is that you always call the agent that's involved and ask them 20 million questions before you actually submit an offer. So you try to get to know like what scenario you're in order for you to proceed the correct way for your client.
Right. Yeah. Like, what's your client control? What's their expectations? Do they realize that some of the stuff isn't brand new in this house and they're willing to take on a furnace that's 10 years old and will probably last another 10 years, but maybe not, and then I also call the lender and make sure, hey, what's the DTI? What's their job? Are they self-employed? Are they wage earner? How long have they been at the job? How strong are they financially, et cetera, because I need to know that, hey, are they maybe qualified to buy this property, or are they very, very qualified to buy this property? So I like to do my due diligence. And so if those people aren't ready to answer those questions, then you might not be ready to buy a house.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you for the information, and I will pass it along.
Thanks, Rocio.
Okay, bye.